Okay, so I'd like to apologize for the change of the schedule. What happened was one of the passengers got sick, and my flight went back to Japan in the middle of Pacific Ocean. So Tokyo wouldn't let me go. So coming straight from John Wayne Airport, I'm going to tell you about reputation and punishment. Actually, I'm not going to tell you exactly about reputation and punishment, but something which is closely related to reputation and punishment. So I'd like to attach a question mark here. And my purpose today is to understand the nature of human cooperation. Okay? Human is unique in sustaining cooperation, even under the possibilities of profitable deviations. Okay? We cooperate even if cooperation is costly and deviation is profitable, because cooperation is rewarded and deviation is punished. Okay? And the important thing is cooperation happens today, and those rewards and the penalties are coming later. Okay? So we have a mental ability or a cognitive ability to anticipate those rewards and the penalties, and we strike a balance between current gains and long-term consequences. Okay? And reputation, rewarding people who did good thing, and punishment. So you specify what's the right thing to do, and you get angry and punish deviators. Those are the two particular mechanisms to do this kind of thing. So, but those are not the only ways to implement this basic mechanism. Okay? So this basic mechanism here is sometimes referred to as reciprocal altruism in the evolutionary biology literature or evolutionary psychology literature. And this basic mechanism is also called repeated game equilibrium. So this leads us to two fundamental questions to understand the nature of human cooperation. First question, how are those rewards and penalties provided? Okay? And the second question, how does cooperation emerge? Okay? One can take theoretical approach. That's a kind of top-down approach. You construct mathematical model and examine those two questions. Okay, so for the first questions, we have a body of literature on repeated game equilibria. And for the second question, we have evolutionary game theory and learning and simulations and tournaments. I have been doing research exclusively on those mathematical approaches, but I'm kind of frustrated because there are lots of theoretical possibilities, and I don't know which one is relevant to understand the real cooperation of human beings. Okay? So there's another or alternative approach that is a kind of bottom-up approach based on empirical studies. So you study the nature of human cooperation in many cases and try to come up with stylized facts, okay? Pattern of behavior, which you frequently encounter in many instances. So I have seen those works, and I also was frustrated because those works are usually silent about the question what I, a theorist, would like to ask. So what I'm going to do today is to strike a balance between theoretical work and empirical study in collaboration with a young sociologist, Shinya Obayashi, who is in the audience. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to confront those theoretical possibilities to reality in terms of a case study of a labor union. Okay. So this is the real title of my talk today, and it's a joint work with Shinya Obayashi. Okay, so what I'd like to do is a combination of top-down and bottom-up approach by means of a case study. And the case study should satisfy two basic properties. Okay, first requirement, the case should fit the basic structure of a theoretical model. Okay, so you have to find out a situation which fits the basic framework of a theoretical model. And second requirement, the case should be very simple. Okay? And the theoretical model I'm going to use is overlapping generations repeated game. And a real-life instance is a particular kind of labor union called community unions. Okay, so let me explain what OLG repeated game is. OLG stands for overlapping generations. And the structure of overlapping repeated game can be explained by this diagram. So time is flowing in that direction, and each segment is one player. So for example, at this particular time, this player is playing a game with this person and this person. And when he retires, he is playing the game with different set of players. So people are coming and going, but this is a basic structure of overlapping repeated game. Okay? You may say that any organization or any firm or any corporation has this structure. If you look at what is happening in Microsoft or GM, the company itself is an ongoing entity, and it goes forever. But each worker is finitely lived. So there are lots of instances of overlapping generation game. But what I'm looking for is a very simple instance of overlapping generation repeated game. Okay. So basically, cooperation can be sustained in overlapping generations game in the following way. Okay, so this player is helping this person who is going to retire soon. The reason he helps this person is that if he does that, then he's going to be rewarded by a future generation. Okay, so I help someone who is going to retire, but I'm going to be rewarded by future generation. This is the basic nature of equilibrium in overlapping generations game. So OLG repeated game was originally formulated by Jack Bremer, and I and Lawrence Smith identified exactly what is possible and what is impossible in this kind of game. So we proved Folk theorem for overlapping generations game. Okay, so this is the basic theoretical framework, and I need to find a good instance, very simple instance in reality, which fits in this framework. Okay, okay, that's where a community union kicks in. What is community union? Well, community union is a particular type of labor union with individual affiliation. So let me explain what I mean by individual affiliation. So let's suppose there's a firm and a worker having a labor dispute. Okay, so one thing what this person can do is to join this community union. Okay, and this is a crucial point, but a single worker of a firm can join the union. Okay, so if this is Toyota and this is Mr. A, Mr. A, even if Mr. A is the only person who is joining this union from Toyota, okay, so this union can represent this worker and take collective action against the Toyota, even if he's the only one person coming from Toyota. That's what I meant by individual affiliation. Okay? So I suppose nobody ever heard of a community union, and that's not without good reason, because individual affiliation is not possible in the United States, in many European countries. It's only possible somehow in Japan. So only in Japan you can see this kind of labor union, which is called a community union. And okay, and then let me explain a typical life of a union member. Okay? So basically, worker have a problem with the firm, labor dispute happens, and then community union provides a free telephone counseling service. Okay, so they make up a phone call to the union, and worker can get some advices. And if the advice doesn't work, then typically about 40% of workers join a community union. Okay, in the first stage, union organizes union firm negotiation. Okay, so union can represent you and negotiate with the firm. And if the dispute is resolved here, that's the end of the story. But about 25% case, dispute is not resolved in collective negotiation, and worker goes on to the second stage. Okay, in the second stage, union organizes protesting activities. So union members go in front of the firm and distribute leaflets. And also, they can file a lawsuit. And there's something, there's a faster and, there's a simpler and faster alternative to litigation, which is called the Labor Relations Commission. And it's a commission to resolve labor dispute organized by local government. So if negotiation breaks down, they move on to those activities, okay? And if conflict is resolved, then typically worker exit, okay? And from entry to exit, it takes about 1 to 2 years. Okay, so you have a labor union, and lots of people are coming and going, and they are doing very simple thing, and that exactly fits the framework of overlapping generation model. Okay, so this is what we are going to examine. Okay, so our case study is based on a particular labor union called Tokyo Managers Union, and this is their homepage. And the word managers here doesn't refer to corporate executives. So managers means workers who do administrative jobs. So workers who have lots of subordinates. So they are the bosses of a workplace. Okay? So this union was founded in 1993 and has resolved about 3,000 cases in the past 16 years. And it has only 2 full-time staff. And currently, they have about 231 members. OK, so let's confirm the overlapping generation structure of this particular union. So this is the statistics for the entry and exit of the union in the fiscal year 2012. Their fiscal year runs from October to September. And you can see that in every month, about 10 people are coming, and also 10 people are going. Okay? So, and next, let me show you the breakdown of those 108 people who left the union in fiscal year 2012. So this is a breakdown in terms of the years in the union. So 108 people exited from the union, and this is the age distribution. So as you can see, lots of them stayed in the union less than 1 year, and lots of them stayed between 1 and 2 years, and some people stayed very long. Okay. On average, they stayed in the union about 1.92 years. So as you can see from these statistics, this union fits exactly the overlapping generation structure. Okay, union activities. So basically, worker engage in negotiation first, and then goes on to protesting activities and litigation and the Labor Relations Commission. Okay, those are the number of each activity. Okay, and the schedules, this is an important part. Schedules, when they have protesting activities, when they go to the courtroom, those schedules are distributed to the union members by means of email. Okay? And how many people come to help each member? Let me show you those numbers. How many union members are typically mobilized in each case? For protesting activities, typically, if you are organizing your own protesting activities, usually 5 to 20 people, other members, come to help you. Okay? And for litigation, about 10 people come to your case. And for Labor Relations Commission, 5 to 20 people come to you. Okay? So if union members come to litigation courtroom, it's very effective because usually juries and a mediator at Labor Relations Commission care about public opinion. So if unions are sending lots of people to the courtroom or a commission, juries and juries and the person in charge in Labor Relations Commission thinks that this case is getting lots of public support. Okay, so those supports are very important. So as you can see, there is lots of cooperation between union members. Okay, so now I move on to the first question. First question is, why do members help each other? Okay. And this question is important because helping is very costly here. So if you go to protesting activities, typically it means that you should take a day off at your workplace because you are still working. So protesting is very costly, and it's hard to imagine that people are helping other members out of other regarding considerations. Okay? So typically they help other members, but after his own case is resolved, they stop cooperating. That means that some kind of selfish or rational calculation is behind their cooperation. So we have to ask this question. Okay? So this is the first question. How are rewards and penalties provided to provide incentives for them to cooperate? Okay, so the existing literature of overlapping generation games construct lots of equilibria, but those equilibria have the following property. Okay, basically, if you don't help, the future generation won't help you. Okay, so that's the reason why you help. Okay, so this part is very simple. But if this is an equilibrium, you must provide an incentive to punish somebody. Okay, so when I'm not helping someone, it can mean two different things. Okay? If I'm not helping someone, maybe I'm just shirking. Maybe I'm just defecting. Another possibility is I'm punishing a defector. Okay? Okay, in the first case here, I should be penalized. Otherwise, I won't cooperate. Okay? In the second case, I should not be penalized. Otherwise, I don't have any incentive to punish. Okay? But the problem of this kind of equilibrium is that typically union members don't have this information. Okay? Union members have very limited observability, and they have very limited knowledge about the history of what has happened in the union. So this equilibrium works under complete perfect information, but it's unlikely to work in the real union. Okay, so therefore the equilibria identified by the existing literature is not so helpful because the monitoring is very limited in community union. Okay? So this is the problem of private monitoring in the literature of repeated game. So what is private monitoring? Private monitoring refers to a situation where each player has a very limited information and no player shares common information. So I have my own piece of information and you have your own piece of information, but we don't share any common information. And that is the case for the labor union. Okay? So we constructed a particular equilibrium to address this issue of limited observability. So now let me show you an equilibrium which works under very limited observability. Okay, so basic idea is if you help someone, if you go to a protesting activity, you are going to meet somebody else, okay, who is also helping this case. And this person is going to help me in the future. Okay? So, so the basic reason why you help other member is to meet somebody else who is going to help me. Okay? So this part is clear. But the subtle part is why I'd like to help someone who came to that same protesting activity. I went to a protesting activity yesterday, and I met someone, and this is the person I'm going to help. The question is why that is the case. Okay, so basically, I don't have time to help everybody. I'm still working, so I have to select a person whom I'm going to help. Okay, I can't really help everybody. That's the first part. And second part, I am more or less indifferent between helping anybody. Okay, so in terms of meeting somebody who is going to help me, okay, all cases look similar to me. So I just pick one. That's the one organized by a person who I met in the protesting activity I went. Okay, okay, so in a stylized, simple overlapping generation game, we constructed this equilibrium and verified that this is actually a sequential equilibrium if the gain of deviation is more than 8 times of the cost of cooperation. And this does not require detailed knowledge about the history of the union. Okay. Okay, so let me make a comment about the title of this talk. This mechanism is not exactly reputation. Okay? It's not the case that union members are carrying a reputation of a good helper or a bad helper. Nobody is carrying any reputation. And it's not exactly punishment. You know? The union doesn't specify what you are supposed to do. And so punishment says union specifies this is union members is supposed to do. And if you don't do, people get angry and punish you. That is not the case. But effectively, you know, this system provides you a right incentive to cooperate. Okay, supporting evidence for a theory. So it's a joint work with a sociologist. It's based on extensive interview with union members. Okay, so we have an extensive interview with one of the union members. And he said, this is exactly what he said in the interview. While waiting outside the courtroom, so he was helping somebody by attending a case in a court. While waiting outside the courtrooms or distributing leaflets in the protesting activities, other members asked me to help their case. Okay. And Mr. A came to know about 10 other members in this kind of way. Okay, and Mr. A helped only those members except for one case. Okay, so he came to know 10 members in this kind of case. And out of those 2 members, 2 or 3 members came to attend his case, his Labor Relations Commission meeting. And 10 out of 2 to 3 members came to his meetings. Okay, so this exactly fits our sequential equilibrium. Actually, we constructed sequential equilibrium based on this interview. So there are lots of possibilities, and we didn't have any clue about the possible sequential equilibrium, which works under limited observability. But when we saw this interview result, we heard this is what's happening, and we managed to construct an equilibrium. Okay, so another supporting evidence. So this equilibrium said that if you don't help other people, nobody is going to help you. So we are looking for an episode of deviation and its consequences. And it's also based on an interview of one of the staffs of this union, Mr. Shitara. Okay, this is a hilarious story. So the union staff, Mr. Shitara, said in one of the cases, a member and he found themselves alone. They are the only person who are coming to a protesting activity. Okay, so and the union member burst into tears. So why this happened? Well, the staff, Mr. Stala, usually suggests people to attend protesting activity and ask those people to help them. Okay? He usually does that. But in this particular case, he was so busy, he forgot to suggest that this is what you are supposed to do. So this guy did attend other people's activities, but he didn't ask them to come to help him. And as a result, nobody came to help him. Okay? And then Mr. Stala giggled and said, this was a terrific episode. And he said, I guess all union members should have such an experience. So he said, all members should realize what is going to happen if they are not going to do what they are supposed to do. Okay, so this is another supporting evidence for the equilibrium we have constructed. Okay, so let's move on to the second question, dynamic questions. How does cooperation emerge? And I'd like to break down this question into two pieces. The first question, within one union, why people come to play this particular equilibrium? Okay, so that's the first question. And the second question, how those unions have evolved over time. So those two questions I'm going to address. Okay, evolution of cooperation within a union. So we have a candidate sequential equilibrium. Union members seem to follow this particular equilibrium. If you help someone, you can meet other members, and they will help you if you ask them to help you. Okay? So this is a candidate equilibrium, and the people seem to play this equilibrium. But the question here is, how do union members come to play this equilibrium strategy? Okay, so there are lots of theoretical possibilities: social contract, dynamic selection, social norms, and focal point. Okay, so social contract explanation is that union members just get together and explicitly select a particular equilibrium. Okay, and the second possible explanation is dynamic selection. Okay. So people slowly learn how to play in a given labor union by means of learning or survival of more successful strategies. Okay? Dynamic argument, convergence towards Nash equilibrium. That's the second possible explanation. And the third one is that the union has a kind of social norm, and the union says, this is what you should do in the union. Okay, there's an explicit or implicit social norm in the union, and people are just following this social norm. Okay, the last explanation was originally given by Thomas Schelling, and this particular equilibrium here somehow stands out as a natural thing to do in a labor union. Okay, so there are lots of theoretical possibilities, and let's examine which one might be a good explanation. So again, let me show you the outcome of the interview with the same person, Mr. A. Okay, he said, I helped others because that's the only way to get help. Okay? And I tried very hard to be visible. And what happened was, he was living in suburban area, and typically people take trains to come to union headquarters, but he rode a bicycle to make himself very visible. And he said that was very effective to get help. Okay, so you have to interact with other people and to be visible to get some help. And he explicitly said that nobody told him that this is the right thing to do. So somehow he came up with this idea that this is the only way to get help. Okay, interview with the staff, Mr. Stala, gave us a slightly different picture. So he said acting together and asking for help in person are essential. And he always tells this to the union members. So he always suggests that this is what you are supposed to do. Okay, and he also said not all of them, not all members follow my advice. But you must admit, you must approve those different reactions. Some people are following his advice, and some people are not following his advice. But you must approve those diversity. Okay, this is the interesting part. He said, if you are too picky about the degree of cooperation to the union or the frequency of participation, things do not work out. Okay? So union doesn't have a rigid rule telling union member that you must help 10 other union members. So there is no rigid rule what you should do. Okay? And he said that part is very important. And he said everything should be voluntary. The sense of voluntary cooperation was very important, according to him. Okay, so let's re-examine those possible theoretical explanations. Social contract theory, which might be applicable to price fixing by cartel members or a bidding ring. But obviously, people are just coming and going. There is no possibility for all possible union members get together and talk and select an equilibrium. So obviously, this explanation is out. And it's not the dynamic selection. Okay? So some people just don't cooperate, and some people just cooperate from the beginning. So no learning seems to be happening in the union. And the reality is something in between social norm and focal point. Okay. And the evolution of the unions. Community unions emerged around 1980s, and right now we have about 300 community unions in Japan. And let me talk about how Tokyo Managers Union was created back in 1993. Okay? So Tokyo Managers Union have a very specific equilibrium where people cooperate. And the question here is how this equilibrium came into existence in the first place. Okay? In mathematical model of evolution or evolutionary game theory, new strategy is introduced by mutation. Okay? With probability of epsilon, somehow new strategy comes in. But what I'd like to show you is how this mutation happens in reality for the case of Tokyo Managers Union. Okay? And this is based on the interview with Mr. Shitara, who happens to be one of the founders of Tokyo Managers Union. He said he created Tokyo Managers Union out of necessity. Okay, back in the early 90s, the Japanese lifetime employment system was falling apart. And as a consequence, there was an increased number of individual labor disputes of bosses in workplaces. Okay, and and he has a very vivid memory about the moment he hit upon the idea of Tokyo Managers Union. And he was meeting with press newspaper reporters and who are examining those recent developments of Japanese labor market. And they're having conversation about what they should do about those managers who are having trouble in their workplaces. Okay? And the newspaper reporters suggested that, well, maybe something systematic should be done to help out those people. And Mr. Shitara sort of said to himself, well, maybe I can organize a union for them. And then reporter said, that's it, okay, do it right now. That's what they suggested. And then he created Tokyo Managers Union. Okay? So that's exactly why this institution was created. And the important question here is if he expected that cooperation between members were going to happen. Okay? So I explicitly asked this question, and he said he had no idea about how to mobilize union members. Okay, the traditional labor unions were not helping those people because those people go out of union after the problem is resolved. So conventional wisdom was it's impossible to organize those workers. But he created a union for those workers, so I asked him if he was worried about this possibility. And he said he was worried, but lots of people need help. And my task is to help those people. How I do that, and if it's successful, that's the second question. The most important thing to do is to help those people. Okay? So he did not expect that those short-lived members are going to help each other. But however, from the very beginning, the union members helped each other. So somehow this sequential equilibrium was played from the beginning by union members. Okay, so let's talk about offsprings of Tokyo Managers Union. So according to mathematical model, successful strategy or successful equilibrium, this particular sequential equilibrium should proliferate in the society by means of imitation. And this is actually what happened. Okay? So there are lots of offsprings of Tokyo Managers Unions, and current memberships of those offspring is in between 50 members and 250. Okay, and some of the smaller offsprings extinct, so they couldn't, obtain a sufficient number of union members, and they are gone. But lots of offsprings are still surviving. Okay, so this is exactly the replicator dynamics, instance of replicator dynamics, successful strategy, having lots of offsprings. This is a real instance of Darwinian dynamics. Okay, so let me summarize my talk by giving you a few messages. Okay, the first message is that to understand human cooperation, it's essential to have both theory and empirics. Okay, this is a broad message. And the more specific message is that to understand human cooperation, you have to look for a game theoretic equilibrium. Okay? So game theoretic equilibrium has a property that there is no profitable deviation. Okay? If a system has profitable deviations, sooner or later, a profitable deviation is found and cooperation breaks down. Okay? So if you observe ongoing cooperation, it must be sustained by some equilibrium. Okay? And actually, we found an equilibrium that can work under very limited observability. So this is basically what we have done. So in repeated games, you have lots of equilibria. Okay? Typically, you have infinitely many equilibria. Okay? And we selected a particular equilibrium which fits the local conditions of the case. Okay? So it's not that we have, so this is an important part. So there are lots of equilibria in a repeated game. And it's not the case that we know all equilibria. Okay? So it's not the case that theoretical economists have identified all equilibria. Okay? We have equilibrium A and B and C. And the question is which one is played in reality. Okay? That's not the case. We don't know the set of all equilibria. So your task is to create a new equilibrium which fits the local condition of a particular case. Okay? So this is a theory-based case study to find out or construct an equilibrium of repeated game based on a particular conditions in the given case. And I think this is a very interesting new research program. Okay, I have two more remarks from the Darwinian perspectives. So one of the interesting findings in this case study is that union members seem to have a heuristic that make this particular sequential equilibrium focal. Okay, so human beings seems to have some heuristics that make some repeated game equilibria focal. Okay? Okay, so Mr. A said, I helped others because that's the only way to get help. This is a kind of heuristic, and I tried very hard to be visible. So this is another heuristic, and this heuristic lead them to a particular sequential equilibrium. Okay. So this is what is called the proximate cause of cooperation in evolutionary biology literature. And this heuristics as a proximate cause of cooperation, we still don't fully understand what kind of heuristics we have and how they work to sustain cooperation. So there is a room for future research to identify and examine the functions of those heuristics. And more interesting or more ambitious agenda is to examine what is called the ultimate cause of cooperation. So ultimate cause question is why we have those particular heuristics. How those heuristics came into existence by way of biological evolution. Okay? And I think those two questions are very interesting in terms of evolutionary biology and psychology. And I think this is all I have to say today.